Welcome to a history lesson on the worst meta League of Legends ever had, Ardent meta. And then we will use this to see if pros really adapt to the meta slowly, as some people seem to claim. So, recently, in a video about Rumble Jungle, Riot Freak made the claim that pros miss things and gave Season 7 Janna as an example to the argument that was between patches 7.2 and 7.17, Janna did not have any balance changes, hence she must have been as strong as she was at Season 7 Worlds throughout Season 7. This was his general argument, which makes sense if we just ignore 14 patches of changes in a row. But if you don't, it's actually a lot easier to explain. So first of all, let's take a look at Janna's weaknesses so that we can later see if the changes that happened in Season 7 made Janna better. She does not have much lane presence, not really a bloodthirsty support. Her peel is not the best. She can cuck a champion if they rely on a long cooldown to engage quite well. So if you're playing Rengar, you probably hate Janna. But if you have a Jax that is YOLO jumping the AD carry every 8 seconds, she's not very good at peeling for the AD carry. She's also fairly gold dependent, she needs items, she's not inherently as useful as a hook support, and also she's squishy, so she's easy to burst if there's a lot of burst in the meta. So let's take a look at what really caused the Ardent meta. So first of all, patch 7.9, Targons got reworked to have a quest reward that would give champions a shield when they were out of combat. This item was very cost efficient because even at level 1, the shield strength plus the HP you would just have from Targons was 135% efficient. So this was not even including the gold per 10, this didn't include the base health regeneration, this didn't include the gold that you were sharing with support, just the HP portion was already more than gold efficient. So this ended up being the best items for AD carries to start in lane, which made it so AD carries had less damage and they had more health. Also, at 7.9, one of the 2 titans of top lane in Season 7 role was reworked. However, in his initial release state, he was considered weak, and afterwards he was buffed, with his last buff being 7.13. Also, patch 7.12, we had a buff to Locket, and it was also a rework to Locket to make it so Locket was now a tank item. It started scaling with the caster's bonus health, which made it so it was better on tanks rather than just any generic support. Also at patch 7.13, Cinderhulk was buffed. Its cost was reduced by 200 and it lost stats just equivalent to how much 200 gold worth of health was worth. And as anybody who played the game in the last 4 months will know, giving tank junglers a jungle item that is cheaper than their counterparts can cause some issues, and it can be quite oppressive to other junglers. Also, its scaling was buffed, and the most common second item for tanks at the time was Warmog, so this buff, 5% bonus health buff, was quite relevant, and this was also good because it scaled your Locket as well. So let's get to where it all went wrong. At patch 7.14, Cho'Gath was reworked. His E was changed to its current iteration rather than being just a toggle effect that gave his auto attack some magic damage. Reworked Cho'Gath was extremely strong and would end up being the highest presence top laner in Season 7 Worlds. Now, I've said that this video would be about large-scale changes, and you may be thinking that just two champions being reworked in top lane to be slightly stronger could not have possibly defined the meta, which you would be right about. However, 7.14 was the patch and Abomination was added to the game. It causes balance issues to this day. This item is not the only item. This item is the only item to just not be oppressive, but oppressive to the point that it actually caused significant drop in League of Legends player base. Patch 7.14, Bramble West was added to the game. Mind you, while current Bramble West is the best 800 gold investment you can make in a game, the release Bramble West actually made it look like current Seeker's arm guard in comparison, because it used to reflect 20 magic damage every time somebody was attacked. And this was built by a tank building armor, so essentially you were maybe dealing 60 damage with your auto attack and taking back 20 magic damage in return, which made it impossible to lane into tanks. Overnight, every fighter was completely removed from the meta. And tanks that built Bramble West had really high win rates. Maokai and Cho'Gath in particular, I believe, exceeded 55% win rate. Now, with all this in mind, let's take a look at how team comps looked before and after patch 7.14. So for here, letters F means flex, M means mage, A means AD carry, and T means tank. So it used to be that top lane, you potentially had a fighter that could add some depth to the macro game. They could split push, they could force the enemy team comp to be scattered. Whereas now you just had a tank with no split pressure every game. Death balls were just much stronger. 2. Since you didn't really have a tank in the jungle prior to the Cinderhulk buffs, Locket was probably bought by support prior to Season 7 changes, whereas after Season 7 changes, where Locket became a tank item and tank junglers were buffed, it was much more reasonable for the jungler or the top laner to buy Locket. And then what happened was that support went from a flexible pick that is probably strong in lane and maybe buys Locket to a pick that only really needed to add power to a Deathball comp. Now let's take a look at Janna's weaknesses again and see if the changes in Season 7 affected how she was weak. She does not have much lane presence, while Targon's AD carries don't really apply much pressure because they didn't have any bonus AD, so she didn't need to add much to the lane. Laning phase was really uninteractive. Her peel is conditional, not very good. Everyone is picking tanks. You don't really need to peel your AD carry too much. The damage they're going to be taking won't be much. Giving a shield every now and then is good enough, and the AD that the AD carry got from the shield was more valuable than the actual peel itself. She's very gold dependent. Guess what? Targon's funneled gold into support, so that was no longer an issue. She's squishy, but who will kill her? I mean, you have a Cho'Gath in top lane, a Sejuani in the jungle, maybe an Orianna that is building Athens in mid lane. Who's gonna kill a Janna? Her being squishy ended up being relatively irrelevant. So was Janna overpowered as patch 7.2? Probably not. There were a lot of changes that happened in Season 7 that made Janna stronger and stronger. I'd say Janna really only ended up being strong at patch 7.14, which was when her pick rate started going up in the first place, even according to Riot Freak's graphs. Now, does this mean that pros never miss things? No. In fact, if you just go a few months forwards, you see that when Rune's Rework was initially launched, Aerie Draven build was actually extremely broken. When Rune's Rework was initially launched, Draven mains were actually pretty desperate because the precision tree used to only give attack speed, so you'd get 0 bonus AD from your runes if you used to take precision. And this meant that if you took PTA on Draven, you just didn't win the game, because a Draven with 60 AD is just a joke. However, that's when people tried different builds and they figured out that Aerie Draven was actually extremely broken. At level 1, Draven's auto attacks used to deal 130 damage, meaning that if you were against a sufficiently squishy support like Sona or Janna, you could literally just kill them with 4 auto attacks. And most AD carries just died to 5 or 6 auto attacks, which meant that Draven was extremely oppressive. However, Draven didn't really see any picks in pro play because most pro players were trying AD carries out with the precision tree, which was the intended AD carry tree, rather than sorcery, which was what made Draven strong. So, do pros miss things? Yeah, of course. But usually they will miss things that are relatively niche, or they're not known to community at large. They won't miss things that are very obvious and solo queue. So when you see that Anivia is extremely broken in solo queue, you may think that, well, pros should try this, but you have to understand every pro in Korea, I believe, already tried Anivia in solo queue. So if they're not bringing it to their games, it's probably because they know something better than the average armchair analyst. So it's good to have your opinions, but you know, understand that other people also try things and sometimes you're just wrong.